Hi, my name is Bonnie. I've been trying to expose government gang stalking since 2006. And in my previous life, when I was young, I'm 76 now, I used to be very interested in psychoanalysis, psychology. I loved Carl Jung. I would just read psychology books, more psychology books, more psychology books, because I'm an introverted, intuitive, feeling, judging type. And my type, INFJs, we make good psychoanalysts, psychologists, therapists, because that's what we're interested in. So I was interested in that and spent many years studying it. And I thought, why don't I apply that to government gang stalking? All right, so that's what I'm trying to do here, and I'm trying to apply something called internal family systems therapy to America. Because if you look at America, we're kind of divided into parts. We have the left and we have the right, and they go at each other viciously. Almost seems like they hate each other. They seem to have very polar opposite parts. And can those parts be integrated? And really, that's the question that is also relevant in government gang stalking. Because in government gang stalking, we have police, firemen, ambulance drivers, security guards, citizen corps. They're gang stalking. They're the shadow part of America. They're the part of America that Kash Patel won't tell you exists, that President Trump won't tell you exists. And you can't blame just those guys. I mean, you can, because this started with Bush Cheney, and Obama didn't tell you this existed, and Biden didn't tell you this existed. And so this is just kind of like COINTELPRO, where administration after administration does it, and nobody tells you it existed. And I think Dick Cheney, and I believe that he and the neocons were the real authors of government gang stalking. They were genius in that they actually got a percentage of the American population to gang stalk. Now, you try to tell America that a percentage of Americans are violating the Bill of Rights, are gang stalking citizens, sometimes on the basis of personal vendettas, such as, that's how my gang stalking started, in 2006. I've been gang stalked for over 19 years. So what I'm trying to do, and I'm doing this kind of informally. I have some notes in front of me. I didn't want to sit down and write this word for word, because at 76, I don't have time for that anymore, to tell you the truth. So this is just kind of an informal discussion. And the goal of the discussion is, how can gang stalking America strengthen the self archetype? Because I think this is really our problem in America. The left and the right are associated with parts. They aren't operating from what is called the self. This was a term that Carl Jung used. This is a concept that I kind of got in Taoism, and you could think of this as the observer part, the part of us, and maybe it's a little more than just a part. This may be closer to the whole, the integrating whole, but the part of us that which observes, which doesn't associate with this, doesn't associate with that, as the Republicans and the Democrats do, but can separate themselves. In internal family systems therapy, they would say unblend from their parts and just observe. And I think if America could do this, it would be a miracle. It would be a whole different country. Can a country do this? Well, it's pretty damn hard for an individual to do this. So for a country to do this, it would need a lot of consciousness. And maybe the consciousness starts with videos like this that just kind of spontaneously talks about things. So let me go through my notes and let's talk about some of this, all right? Now, something I wrote down here in my notes is, America is conscious of the designated protector part in its national system. Society is conscious that there are parts in our nation's system, let's see, okay, that protect us. Now, who are the parts in our nation system that protect us? Well, it's the police, it's the firemen, it's the ambulance drivers, it's the security guards, it's Citizen Corps back when Bush Cheney started that. So these are the parts that we think of as the protectors. And internal family systems therapy, they talk about the protectors. But what I'm here to tell you as a gang stalking target for 19 years, they're more than just protectors. They have a shadow side. And that unacknowledged, unconscious shadow side, they're gang stalkers. They're participating in this gang stalking program. I think Cheney even got some churches to gang stalk. I was at the mission, maybe it was a year or so ago, and I have my little camera wherever I go because I take pictures of gang stalking patterns. And this one person in a red car told me, "What are you doing here? You don't belong here. Like, you know, get out of here." I was on church grounds, and this is, I believe, maybe, I don't know for sure, but maybe all the upper echelons of society, the, what do you call them, the strengths of society were involved, or Cheney and the neocons involved in government gang stalking. But that's, you know, I did that. Churches might be involved. I don't know. Okay, so let's go here and talk about the unblending part. In order to unblend with gang stalking, to unblend with your shadow part, you have to become conscious of it. And so right now, Kash Patel, President Trump, are associating with the gang stalking part. Kash Patel has said, in talking to police, he said, "I have your backs." Previous to that, President Trump told police, "I have your backs." So this is, you know, they're kind of doing the opposite of what the Democrats did. The Democrats were, police are terrible, let's defund the police, and the Republicans are, "I have your backs." So both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, are associating with a part. First responders, police, firemen, "I have your backs." Now, this is not in my best interest because they gang stalk me. So what I'm trying to say is, let's use internal family systems therapy to disassociate from those parts, because that's the only way that government gang stalking is going to go from unconsciousness to consciousness. So what I would like of Kash Patel, and I'm very disappointed in him, but I understand him. I understand how important the Republicans think their First America agenda is, and I personally didn't like the woke agenda of the Democrats either. I supported Trump voted for him twice, so I understand where they're coming from. They don't want to ruin the momentum that they have in implementing the America First agenda. So get out of here with this government gang stalking. There is no way we are going to expose that, because that would be a major scandal to say that a percentage of our population is gang stalking, targeting people. And what I'm saying is they are doing it oftentimes on the basis of personal vendettas. In other words, the fireman who started my gang stalking in 2006, when he moved in next to me, didn't like us as neighbors and wanted to get rid of us. That fireman knew what he was doing, and he essentially wanted to get us out of the neighborhood, and he used suspicious activity report, got a lot of his fireman neighbors to go along with this, because I lived in Newburgh, New York, and it was very close to New York City. And after 9/11, a lot of those firemen moved. They wanted to get their families out of the city, and a lot of them moved into my new development neighborhood. And so I was surrounded by a lot of firemen. And what happens with suspicious activity reports, how they're abused, you can get a lot of these mobbers, these people who were doing gang stalking. You can get a lot of them to come together and all confirm each other's story, so that I'm the problem, and when a lot of them confirm the story, then it really becomes consolidated, and you can put it in fusion databases, and you can spread it all over the United States. So what can happen did happen. I moved from Newburgh, New York to Oceanside, California, and I said to myself, if I move, will it end? Will the gang stalking end? Well, on my way over here, I was gang stalked in Arizona, in New Mexico, in Texas. I'm gang stalked here where I live, in Oceanside, California. So that's when I knew it was a national program. And I found a really great guy on YouTube from North Carolina who is also gang stalked. And I have a couple of his videos, which I posted on my website, stopgangstalkingpolice2.com, which you can go there and see somebody else beside me who also was brave enough to come forth and create videos about his gang stalking experience. But now back to the unblending process. And I'm an introverted intuitive, and so I tend to go here and there and there. I'm not a step-by-step sensing type. So you'll notice that. And this is impromptu. I didn't write all this down. This is not a speech. This is just thoughts and notes. Okay, so right now, what I'm saying is America has no self. America is associating with its different parts, Republican parts, Democrat parts. I've got the back of law enforcement parts, but it's not being in observer mode, which is really kind of hard to do. If you read about Taoism, to be that observer, it's a real spiritual practice. It requires mindfulness. And it requires that you not associate with any of your parts. And, when I was reading psychoanalysis, there was one who talked about multiple personalities. We all have multiple sub-personalities, multiple parts. We think of ourselves as one person, but as you know, if you have self-conflict sometimes, shall I do this, shall I do that, no, I can't do that, etc. Even Freud said there's the ego, the superego, the id. So, there's this idea of parts. So we can associate with a part. You can associate with the good girl part or the good boy part, as the Democrats and the Republicans do. You ask Democrats, they're the good party. You ask Republicans, they're the good party. So they are associating with a part. They're not standing back and observing their own parts as well as Democrat parts or Republican parts. So what I'm asking you to do is to become conscious of government gang stalking. We have to be in observer mode. America has to be in observer mode. And when somebody like me comes forward with a YouTube channel and a website, and I've got loads of pictures, loads of videos, and then that guy from North Carolina comes forth and he's showing you his gang stalking, the observer, if we had observers in America, would be able to look at it. They would investigate it. They would be curious about it. They would find out more about it. They would find out, is it true? Is it not true? But we don't have that. We don't have anybody that I can see, except for, wonderful people like Mike Lee, who don't have the power to be president, to do this kind of thing, to just have an observer part. Even he is very partisan now. All of America is divided into camps. You don't see anybody except gurus, religious, spiritual people who even care to try to use mindfulness to dissociate from parts and to look at things objectively. But this is what they do in internal family systems therapy. They call it unblending your parts. And the way to unblend your parts is to take a look at the emotion and the anxiety that spurred government gang stalking. Back in 9/11, we were attacked. Dick Cheney was aghast. Attack America? Kill Americans? How can you do this? There was anxiety. And so they put in place a program of total surveillance. You are even surveilled inside your own home with this program, government gang stalking. They have thousands of people across the United States. Maybe it might be 1 million. I don't know how many it is, but I call them the Reds, Citizen Corps, that track you. I think the military might be involved in this, because how can they track people 24 hours a day. Once I was at the beach when I first moved here to Oceanside, and I got talking to this guy, and he told me he was a soldier at Camp Pendleton. And so I asked him, have you ever heard of government gang stalking? And he just kind of smiled at me and he said, you wouldn't believe what's going on. So that answer told me a lot. I think that the military might be involved, maybe military here at Camp Pendleton, because who is doing this total surveillance? Can the FBI do that? Or do you require the military? So I'm just raising questions. This is my observing, curious part. Now, if that part wanted to be, the observer part wanted to be compassionate, it could look at the reasons that they formed government gang stalking, that Dick Cheney did it. And that was that he had to defend himself against this. This could never happen again. 9/11 could never happen again in the United States. And so he did this. First, he wanted to form a program in which everybody would be spying on everybody else in the United States. And Congress looked at this and they said, that's a Stasi. What are you, crazy? You can't do that. And so he did it under cover of the state secrets doctrine. They still did what they wanted to do. That program that I'm talking about was called Operation Tips. And you can look that up online and you could see what Bush Cheney wanted to do. Congress said, no, you can't do it. That's an American Stasi. And so they did it worse, government gang stalking, covered it by the state secrets doctrine, which is the way that they do all of their unconstitutional programs. And so government gang stalking was born, and in 2006, when a new fireman neighbor moving up from the city into my community with a lot of other firemen, one didn't like me, and I asked the gang stalkers in my neighborhood, I asked one of them, I said, what have I ever done to hurt you? And this is what he told me. He said, you think you're better than us. Then I asked another gang stalker, I said, why gang stalking? And he said, when we moved here, we expected to be welcomed into the neighborhood. Now, essentially, they thought, this person is unwelcoming, this person thinks she's better than us, we invite her to the Tupperware parties and she doesn't come. Well, they don't understand personality type, because if they understood personality type, and my INFJ personality type is 1% of the population, they would understand that some people are very clear introverts, and very clear introverts, at most, they have a deep relationship with one person at a time. They aren't stimulated like extroverts in social situations. As a matter of fact, they're bored to death. They don't like them. That's not their thing. Like, I don't like to go to Tupperware parties. I don't like to go to parties. I was, at that point, I was writing a book, The Search for Being, which I finished, and I unpublished it because I went through a Zen phase that didn't believe in words, and especially not my words. So I just kind of unpublished it, though it was really monumental in my life, the writing of that book and the coming together and the consciousness raising that book helped me to do. So anyway, getting back to, I am scattered, I'm an introverted intuitive, I don't do things like sensing types in a step-by-step manner. So what am I saying here about government gang stalking? What I'm saying is that there was a reason that it was formed and after 9/11, and the reason was anxiety. Anxiety over the idea of being attacked. And with your shadow parts, there's always anxiety involved in that. Right now, Kash Patel isn't going to tell you about government gangs stalking because he has anxiety that this would destroy the whole America First agenda. This would derail it. A percentage of America is gang stalking, violating the Constitution, and they've been doing it since Bush Cheney. You can't expose that. People will lose trust in the police and in firemen and in security guards and in ambulance drivers and in nurses in hospitals, because nurses are some of the biggest gang stalkers, and I get that from the research literature on mobbing. All right, so you can't expose that. So our administration is a parts administration, just like the Democrats are, the Republicans. They're associated with parts. They are incapable of being in observer mode, being at the part of the self archetype, as Carl Jung would call it, and just observing and calling, a spade, an ace, whatever it is, like being objective. They're incapable of that. We are a country of partisans, and so exposing a program like government gang stalking, how do you do it? Well, one way to do it is to take a look at something like internal family systems therapy, how you unblend from your parts, how you dissociate from your parts, how you try to develop what Carl Jung called the self, that observer function. In Taoism, they try to ask you to detach from your emotions and to just observe them. Very hard to do. Like, I kind of gave up trying to do that. But I like the INFS idea of unblending, because we do get associated by our shadows. There are times when we're taken over by our shadows. And that's what happened to the country in government gang stalking. And you can, if you are motivated, dissociate from that, and you can observe it, in neurolinguistic programming. And I mention that because anchoring, which is a neurolinguistic programming tactic, is one of the main tactics in government gang stalking, and you can go to my website to find out more about that. And I know that because after I retired from teaching, I thought about becoming a coach, and neurolinguistic programming is used in coaching. So I bought this set of tapes, over $2,000, and I studied neurolinguistic programming. And that's how when I became a gang stalking target, I knew what they were doing. I knew about anchoring because I had studied it. And then I met some people on the internet, this one guy who was running a neurolinguistic programming workshop, because that's how they teach people about it, through workshops. And he said, I was wondering why so many firemen were becoming members of our workshops and trying to learn about neurolinguistic programming. So just throw that out there. So I'll just go through my notes. And so just what I want to say is that the difference between the self and when you're totally associated with parts is, especially shadow parts, anxiety. And government gang stalking was started because of anxiety. And it's perpetuated by Kash Patel and President Trump, but through anxiety. If they ever exposed this would be the end of their First America agenda. They couldn't help America economically. They couldn't help, stop the crime of the gangs, So now I'm looking at it from myself. And when I look at it objectively, I can be compassionate, and I can understand the reasons why they are pretending it doesn't exist, why they want America to be unconscious of it. So let's see, I'll just see if there's anything else I want to say in my notes. Well, I guess that's about it. The important ideas is this idea of the self, which Carl Jung talked about. This he called it the self archetype. Gotta take some tea. In Taoism, they also talk about the observer part of you, and how it's important to develop that. Carl Jung talked about the shadow, and the shadow is that part of ourselves which we are unconscious of and which we often project onto others. So that's pretty much what I want to say. How can gang stalking America strengthen the self archetype? First, you have to be motivated to do it. You have to be kind of spiritual. In other words, that you don't want to be controlled by any of your parts. You kind of want to look at them. And government gang stalking is part of America. But nobody's going to tell you that, because we are a divided country. We are a polarized country. We are a country dominated by our parts. We have never even tried to form the observer function, and probably because that's a very spiritual thing. That's why you have to study Taoism and some other Eastern religions. I'm looking now at the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and I think she talked more about this thing, but I have to study it more to find out. So I'm going to end this video now. I promised you that I didn't write this all down. I'm not a sensing type. I didn't explain it step by step. I just kind of rambled because I'm an intuitive type and my mind works that way. It goes from one idea to another. And I'm 76 and I'm not perfect. I don't try to be perfect anymore. I just wanted to present this idea to you. And the idea is that we are dominated by our parts, and we will be until we can have that observer function and not associate with any part and not say the America First agenda is our salvation, or the woke agenda is our salvation, or the socialist agenda is our salvation, or the libertarian agenda is our salvation, but that we can cultivate the self, that observer part that just lets us look at things. And if we could do that, then we would admit that government gang stalking exists.